The stagecoach was a common form of transportation, and it could be used for long-distance travel. The coaches were typically pulled by teams of horses and were made of wood and leather. Now, not all stagecoaches were created equally. Others had a little more seat cushion or better suspension, but regardless, it was bumpy and oftentimes uncomfortable, as well as dusty. But it was a necessary means for many people until railway became the main source of travel. And of course, as the 20th century progressed, cars. The blacksmith was an incredibly important figure in towns, especially in the western frontiers. They were skilled craftsmen who worked with iron and other metals, and their work was essential to a community. They were responsible for creating and repairing tools, weapons, and machinery oftentimes, as well as shoeing horses and repairing wagons. They were often involved in constructing buildings and bridges, and because of their many skills, blacksmiths were highly respected members of a community, and they played a vital role in the development and growth of towns in the late 1800s. Newspapers played a critical role in towns as well. They were the primary source of information for many people, providing news, opinion pieces, and advertisements for local businesses. Newspapers were an essential part in keeping people informed about events happening in their town and the larger world around them. They also helped shape public opinion on important issues such as politics, social movements, and cultural trends. Additionally, newspapers provided a platform for individuals and groups to voice their views and concerns, which helped promote civic engagement and, of course, public discourse. Newspapers were a crucial part of life in towns during the late 1800s, and they provided a vital source to the community. Saloons also played a significant role in Western towns. They were often the first business to be established in newly settled areas, and they quickly became a gathering place for locals. Saloons were more than just a place to drink. They were also social hubs where people could meet up with friends, play games, and exchange news and gossip. Saloons were often the site of political rallies and community settings, but they were also places where people could go to discuss important issues of the day. Saloons also provided employment opportunities for bartenders and musicians, as well as other entertainers. All of this helped stimulate the local economy. However, saloons also had a darker side with issues such as gambling, often violence, and of course, prostitution, which was associated with saloons. Photography studios were also an important part of Western towns during the late 1800s. Photography was a relatively new technology, but people were fascinated by it. Photography studios allowed residents to have their portraits taken, which was a popular activity at the time. Having a photograph taken was a way for people to capture a moment in time, as well as preserve a memory for themselves and for their loved ones. Photography studios also played an important role in documenting the history and the development of Western towns. Photographs were also used to create postcards, which were then sent to friends and family to share their experiences. Additionally, photographs were used by local businesses to advertise their products and services. So photography studios were often run, again, by skilled craftsmen who were also well-respected members of their community. Now, not every town had a U.S. Marshal during the late 1800s. However, most towns did have some form of law enforcement, which could be a local sheriff, a deputy, or a town marshal. The U.S. Marshal Service was established in 1789 and was responsible for enforcing federal laws and protecting federal courts. In the Western Territories, U.S. Marshals were often responsible for maintaining law and order in areas beyond local law enforcement's reach. They were tasked with capturing fugitives, transporting prisoners, and protecting federal property and officials. While U.S. Marshals were not present in every Western town during the late 1800s, they played an important role in maintaining law and order in the territories, especially after the Civil War, and were often called upon to assist local law enforcement when needed. The mercantile store was an essential part of life as well. These stores were often the only source of goods and supplies for residents. They often carried a wide variety of items, including food, clothing, tools, and household goods. Mercantile stores were often owned and operated by prominent members of a community and were important for employment for residents as well. They also played an important role in the local economy, providing credit and other financial services to residents. Additionally, stores often were a gathering place for locals and others where you could just catch up on the day with the news, exchange gossip, and discuss the day's issues. Banks were also crucial in helping develop towns in the West. They provided a safe place for residents to store their money and valuables and helped to promote economic growth and stability in the region. Banks also provided loans for other financial services and residents, as well as businesses to help spur investment and develop the area. Additionally, banks played a vital role in facilitating trade and commerce between different regions, and they could exchange currency and provide letters of credit. Robberies were often a significant concern, particularly in areas that were remote and lacked adequate law enforcement. We know after the Civil War, bank robberies happened a lot with outlaws, and these remote western town banks were often the target. So, banks had to take various security measures to protect themselves, such as hiring armed guards and installing alarm systems. Education was important in towns in the West. Schools provided children with knowledge and skills and helped to promote social and cultural development. Schools were also used as gathering places for community events and meetings. Education integrated new immigrants into American society, and despite being often underfunded and understaffed, education remained a vital part of the fabric of towns in the West. Medicine in the 1800s in the West was very, very different from what it is today. Medical knowledge was very limited, and many treatments were ineffective or even harmful. Doctors were often scarce, especially in rural areas, and people often relied on home remedies and folk medicine to treat ailments. Surgery was risky and often performed without anesthesia or antiseptics, which often led to high risk of infection. Additionally, diseases such as cholera, typhoid, and tuberculosis were common, which could be deadly. Mercury was believed to have antibacterial and antiviral properties and was used to treat various ailments, including syphilis. So mercury was typically administered as a mercury compound called mercurious chloride, also known as calomel. So calomel was often given orally, or it was applied topically, and it was believed to promote sweating and stimulate the digestive system. Later, development of vaccines helped to prevent the spread of diseases such as smallpox, and the use of antiseptics and anesthesia during surgery helped to reduce the risk of infection and, of course, improve patient outcomes. However, medical care in the West during the 1800s was often limited and inadequate, and people suffered and died from illnesses that are now easily treatable. So in the long run, living in a Western town was often challenging and dangerous. Settlements were located in remote areas as the frontier became more populated through Western immigration, migrants, removing indigenous people from their native lands. And so often there were harsh living conditions, which included extreme weather, disease, and limited access to resources. However, towns in the West became places of opportunity and adventure, attracting pioneers, entrepreneurs, and of course, adventurers.